Our study in the book of Ecclesiastes this morning. We got almost through chapter 5, a very involved chapter last week. We didn't quite make it all the way through. Chapter 6 is not too awful long, so I'm going to make an attempt at finishing 5 and 6 this morning. That's kind of why I'm rushing y'all to come on in. I got a lot to say. Solomon and the Holy Spirit actually is who has a lot to say. As we were going through chapter 5, we got down to speaking about the vanity of those, as it says in verse 10, who loves money, will not be satisfied with money. We know that the love of money is the root of all evil, and it's not the money itself, but Solomon was a very, very wealthy man. My dad used to say when people would ask him a question, he'd say, "I'm not qualified to speak on that subject." He was not going to ramble on about something he didn't. He'd just say, I'm not qualified to talk about that. Solomon was qualified to talk about being wealthy. Okay, I mean, richest man maybe that ever was, so he knew what he was talking about. Just as a recap, we won't go all the way back, but verse 10 brings the idea that money cannot bring satisfaction. It's just you're not going to be satisfied. Who has enough? You never have enough. The fact that it attracts a crowd of dependents. People show up when they know you got lots of money. It affects one's peace of mind, and it can be easily misused. Now, those are the points that we made last week about money, and now in verse 14, it says, when those riches were lost through a bad investment and he had fathered a son, then there was nothing to support him. So, your wealth is not something to depend on and to put your trust and faith in, because you lose it in a heartbeat. Maybe bad investment, maybe circumstances of life. I didn't live through it, but I've read a lot about the stock market crash in 1929. What about all of those wealthy people that lost everything? They're jumping out of windows in New York City, killing themselves just because they had put their trust and their value in that money. And you don't ever know what's going to happen with something like wealth. The sad thing about this guy is he now has a son. He's got a family. He can't take care of them. It's gone. He has not planned ahead, has not been wise. Verses 15 says, and he had come naked from his mother's womb, and so will he return as he came. He will take nothing from the fruit of his labor that he can carry in his hand. Dust to dust. You're going to leave with the same thing you got here with. So Solomon talks about the futility of striving your whole life and all of the grief and aggravation involved with wealth and the labor of making money when you didn't come with it and you're not going to leave with it. I don't know if we looked at Matthew 6, but we will. Matthew 6, 19 and 20. Everybody's looking for a good investment. People want to know what is the best investment. This is Jesus talking. He was the only guy that we know that was smarter than Solomon. Okay? He says, do not lay up for yourselves treasures upon earth where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal. But lay up for yourself treasures in heaven where neither moth nor rust destroys and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there will be your heart also. We talk so much about Solomon's references that are brought over into the New Testament. Well, here's this whole concept of wealth. Jesus makes a comment about it right there. So, verse 16, he says, this is a grievous, some translations say sickening evil. Exactly as a man is born, thus he will die. So what is the advantage to him who toils for the wind? It's a sickening evil. It's a grievous evil. What is evil? It's sin. Okay? So these are works of the devil. Can you own the wind? Anybody own the wind? Y'all know I'm bad about, I don't like raise your hand questions. The only ones I ask are the ones I know no one's going to raise their hand to. Can you own the wind? So why strive for it? Is that not futility? Why devote your life to the accumulation of money? This is what Solomon's saying. This is vanity. Verse 17. Throughout his whole life, he also eats in darkness with great vexation, sickness, and anger. It brings great suffering. This guy would have been better off poor, would he not? He had a taste of wealth, then lost it. Now he eats in darkness. His life is in terrible circumstances. Look at the 4 key words brought up. Darkness, great vexation, sickness, anger. Are those fruits of the Spirit? On the contrary, quite opposite. Quite opposite. There's no gain in any of that. Solomon paints a vivid picture here. It's a pretty pitiful sight. Sitting alone in darkness, filled with emotional, spiritual, and physical anguish. Money is not worth that kind of grief. Life has much more to offer than the foolish goal of gaining wealth. It is simply chasing after the wind. Okay, it's a fitting conclusion to the preacher's discussion on money because he knew. Verse 18, here's what I have seen to be good and fitting to eat, good and fitting. Okay, boom. He's talked about all of this negative stuff. Now he says, here's what I've seen. To eat, to drink, and enjoy oneself in all one's labor in which he toils under the sun during the few years of his life which God has given him. For this is his reward. So basically, what's he saying? Be happy. Be happy. Sadness, grief, aggravation, those things. I mean, I watched one series of, I don't even know what that thing was last night, but this guy went around the world looking at 4 places. We only saw one, Okinawa. There are more people there that live over 100 years old than anywhere. And there's 3 more of those places around the globe. And he looks at them and he's talking to all of these old people. And among the many things that they said, this one little old Japanese lady said, don't get angry about anything. And I thought, Solomon, that was wise enough. Don't be angry. Be happy. Why? He says it's good. Verse 18, it's fitting, and it is God-given. It's God's reward. So are those not 3 very positive things about that? Second, since God has given riches to, and has not given riches to everyone, everyone's not rich, right? He's chosen who he's blessing. First, it's responsibility of the wealthy to use their riches wisely. See the contrast in what we are talking about here? If we read down through 19, furthermore, as for every man whom God has given riches and wealth, he, capitalized, has also empowered him to eat from them and to receive his reward and rejoice in his labor. This is the gift of God, for he will not often consider the years of his life because God keeps him occupied with the gladness of his heart. Look at the contrast here. Wealth without God brings nothing but misery. Just glance back up at verses 10 through 17. That's 7 verses right there. Is there anything, or should I say anyone, who is missing in all of those verses from 10 down through 17? Not one mention of God in those verses. How about the next 2 verses? 18 through 20? 4 times in those 2 verses is God mentioned. So, Contrast or not, we look at all of this unhappiness through all of these verses, through all of this description, and God is not mentioned. The last two verses, God is mentioned 4 times. There is happiness with God in life. Man will not count the years of his life because with the right attitude, he is enabled by God to enjoy what he said, what he has. Be happy. Don't dread life or dread death. You don't have to dread either of those as long as you're living with God and he is empowering you to do the right things. Okay, that finishes us with chapter 5. We will go into chapter 6. And we see in this next phase of Solomon's investigation of purpose and happiness, he begins to consider life with God. All of this next through chapter 6, 7, and 8, he reports now on a new approach as he looks into pursuit of life imbalances. There is an evil which I have seen under the sun, and it is prevalent among men. Under the sun, that's the term that he uses all the time, and that basically means everywhere. Where does the sun shine? Even though it's dark on the other side of the world right now, the sun's going to shine. So when he talks about everywhere the sun shines, he's seen this evil that is everywhere prevalent among men. A man to whom God has given riches and wealth and honor so that his soul lacks nothing, all that he desires. Now, here's a man who's got all kind of stuff. We've got positives and negatives. We're going to stop right here and talk about the positive. God has given him riches and wealth. He has honor. He's well thought of. His soul lacks nothing which he desires. He's got everything he wants. He's surrounded by money, honor, and everything he wants. Yet, God has not empowered him to eat from them. A foreigner enjoys him. This is a vanity and severe affliction. Well, why is he not empowered to enjoy these things? Well, has he lost this wealth? Has it gotten away from him? Or is he so obsessed with the love of money that, as we call it, he's so tight that he won't spend any of it and enjoy it? So what's the worth of it there? He won't enjoy it. God is not the cause of him. It says God has not empowered him to do it because God's the one who gave it to him in the first place, right? So it's not God's fault. When God is excluded, it will no longer be a blessing, but now will be a what? A curse. And what's a curse? Sin. So, if you're not enjoying your wealth, if you're not doing the things that Solomon says you should do with it, it's becoming a curse. It is becoming sin. This is a vanity and an affliction. 13th vanity that Solomon mentions throughout the book of Ecclesiastes. Number 13, having wealth but failing to use it properly. Danger, danger, Will Robinson, in wealth. Okay? Danger there. If a man fathers 100 children, Solomon did have 1,000 wives, right? So that wasn't that big of a long shot. If a man fathers 100 children and lives many years, how many they be, but his soul is not satisfied with good things, and he does not even have a proper burial, then I say better the miscarriage than he. This guy's better off he'd never been born. We talked last week about Peter and the New Testament references to those who have come to God and then turned away like a sow going, getting washed and going, jumping right back in the mire. And Peter says it would be better off for them had they never known the gospel in the first place. So this is kind of the same attitude here. If you're not satisfied, it must be a corrupt heart, because God didn't do this to the man. He gave him the riches. And if he's not empowering him to do it, then it's sin on that man's part. It's his fault. It's not God's fault, okay? Can't blame it on anyone else. King Saul always comes to mind. Somebody else's fault, not his. He dies, nobody mourns. Where are all these children and business associates? He's rich. He's got all this honor and all of this stuff. Well, he's got 100 kids. Where are they all? Can't even get a proper burial. This fact magnifies his failures. Back in Deuteronomy chapter 8:26, we won't go there and read, but this is Moses, God talking to the children, saying, I'm going to do all of these things for you. I'm going to give you this land. We're going to do all of this. But if you don't follow me and follow my commandments and are disobedient, y'all are going to drop out here in the desert, and the birds are going to pick the bones, and there's not even going to be anybody here to scare the birds away. Similar to the burial we're talking about. What about Jezebel? Anybody remember her burial? Where her tombstone is? Threw her out the window and the dogs ate her. No burial for her. Jeremiah talks about when Nebuchadnezzar comes into Jerusalem, the prophets and the priests and all of the people, they will not be buried. They will die in the streets. Neither their wives or their children will be buried. You think it wasn't the same policy as it is in war times today? Those people got left. Whoever got murdered and killed in battle, they laid there until they rotted. So we see this same concept with Solomon talking about the man who has not lived with God in his life. All right, so he says that it would be better off if he had been miscarried, for it comes in futility. I'm in verse 4. For it comes in futility and goes into obscurity, and its name is covered in obscurity. It never sees the sun. It never knows anything. It is better off than he, this rich guy, even if the other man lives 1,000 years twice and does not enjoy good things. Do not all go to the same place? If he'd never been born and he lives 2,000 years and has everything and dies without God, what has he achieved? The same as a stillborn child. 5 ways here on this stillborn attitude that I looked up. Comes into futility, without meaning, even though the pain that the mother endured during childbirth, not really worth anything. Goes into obscurity, departs into darkness, into the realm of the dead. It's no life for this baby. Name is covered in obscurity, never makes a reputation, either to be ridiculed or mocked, or never makes the mistake of the man who lost his wealth. Never sees the sun, never lived to experience the light of day, which represents, we've talked about already, light versus darkness, the goodness of God versus darkness. So never the opportunity to live under the sun. Never knows anything, doesn't remember bad experience. To the unwise whom God has given much, but doesn't appreciate it. So worse off than the child. This man's worse off than the child who never experienced any of that stuff, because he lost it. It was not worth anything. Verse 6, even if the man lives 1,000, well, I've already read that one. Okay, looking back at my notes on verse 6. The dissatisfied man has the same joy as the stillborn child. None. Both end up in the same place. So what good is this long, long life if you live miserably? And what about eternity for you now? You're talking about living 2,000 years in a miserable situation and not having God in your life, and then you die and there's no one to even bury you or to mourn. Now what do you got to look forward to? As I understand it, it will be more than 2,000 years. We're talking about eternity now. Okay, so what is the question here? Do not all go to the same place? Yeah, because he did not see the good things. He did not enjoy life. He did not let God's blessings be a positive thing. All man's labor is for his mouth, and yet the appetite is not satisfied. Now here's one I can talk about. Oh man, I'll never eat again. How long's it been? Boy, I seem like I'm getting hungry again. I know we've all dealt with that, but your appetite, your physical appetite, is always there. It's never satisfied. It may be for a little while, but that's something that Solomon's using as an example that everyone under the sun can relate to. You're hungry. You want. You get filled, but guess what? You are going to get hungry again. Some people talk about living to eat or eating to live. Which one of those is it? Well, it's kind of both of them, I think, because you're never satisfied with these things. Continuously have to eat, but you never feel. Your appetite does not belong to man. What advantage does the wise man have over the fool? What advantage does the poor man have knowing how to walk before the living? Well, we hadn't got to that verse yet, but about the appetite, it doesn't belong to man. Proverbs 30:16. You can jot these down. We won't go there, but they're worth looking at. Proverbs 30:16, Isaiah 5:14, Habakkuk 2:5. What those refer to is the term Sheol that we read through the scriptures, which is darkness. It's the realm of death, meaning the realm of Satan. But appetite doesn't belong to man. Proverbs and Isaiah and Habakkuk say that it belongs to Sheol, which is darkness, which is death, and it's never satisfied. Is Satan ever satisfied? If he hits us one time, if we hold him back through the power of the Spirit, well, that's great. Is he going to come back again? Oh, yeah. Even when Christ was tempted, it said that Satan left him, how long? Forever? For a while, for a season, for a minute. So when Satan comes back to us, and the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak, and we succumb to his temptations, is he done now? No, never satisfied. That's what Solomon's talking about. It's never an end to Sheol and the darkness. So, on a positive note, man's need is for more than food. Solomon, we don't even have to go to Matthew 4:4, do we? Do we need to just live on bread alone? No. So, appetite, forget about bread, no matter how good it is. Are you in here? Yeah. I need some, by the way. We need more than that. Man shall not live by bread alone. We read earlier that God has put eternity in our hearts, and what should that make us want? More than life. More than what life has to offer. If we're worried about riches, if we're worried about honor, if we're worried about all of those things that he talked about, that guy who's eating miserably in darkness with no one to even bury him, not his business associates, not his kids, not his friends, they're all gone. Don't we all want more than that? I won't ask for a raise of hands. We want more than that. Okay, verse 8. For what advantage does the wise man have over the fool? What advantage does the poor man have knowing how to walk before the living? Well, he's got a couple of questions here. What advantage does the wise man have over the fool? Well, none, according to how he's looking at it. If his wisdom does not lead him to the light of God. We're doing pretty good on time. Let's look at 1 Corinthians. First Corinthians chapter 1, verse 20 through, I would probably read through 25. 1 Corinthians 1, verse 20. Where is the wise man? Where is the scribe? Where is the debater of this age? Has God made foolish the wisdom of the world? What advantage does the wise have over the fool? Ecclesiastes. For since in the wisdom of God, the world through its wisdom did not come to know God, God was well pleased through the foolishness of the message preached to save those who believe. For indeed, Jews ask for a sign, Greeks search for wisdom, but we preach Jesus crucified, to Jews a stumbling block and to Gentiles foolishness. Where's the wisdom versus the fool? But to those who were called, both Jews and Greeks, Christ, the power of God and the wisdom of God. That's the wisdom that we need to be focusing on. Verse 25, because the foolishness of God is wiser than men, and the weakness of God is stronger than men. So where is Solomon sending us? To God, which is the theme of this whole book, how it's going to end up after he says it a couple of three times, but after all of this brilliant deduction and analysis of mankind and life, the bottom line is, I have found what it is. I have found the answer. I got the answer. Fear God. So that's where we are heading. Okay. What advantage does the poor have? Well, obviously disadvantage because he's poor. But he has an advantage. He knows how to walk before the living. We talked about this wealthy man who had no friends, the poor man rests well at night. We talked about that the poor man, even though he's a laborer, he works hard all day. When he goes home and goes to bed at night, he's tired. He's going to sleep. He's going to rest. The wealthy man's got so much stuff going through his head and this big old full stomach, and he's laying in the bed flipping and flopping and turning. He has no rest. He has no peace. The poor man has an advantage. It may or may not help to be wise. Knowing versus doing, there's no guarantee. There's no telling what you know. All kind of stuff you may know, but if you don't apply it, if you don't do it, what's the value of that? Paul says it's foolishness. It's the foolishness of man. Friends can turn against you for no good reason. Verse 9, what the eyes see is better than what the soul desires. This too is futility and striving after the wind. That's the 14th vanity that Solomon has come up with. And we see, people say things, they say, well, that's a cliche. Well, sure it is. Well, why is it a cliche? Because it's been said so many times. Well, why has it been said so many times? Because it's true. I mean, the whole concept here, what the eye sees, that's something that can be obtained. If you can see it, it's real, right? What about a bird in the hand is better? Okay, cliche, but is it true? Well, yeah, it comes right from Solomon if you want to look at it. What is seen is worth something. That can be attained. What the soul desires, what is that? Is that not a dream that we talked of earlier, which is worth what? They used to say that and a dime will get you a cup of coffee. Now it's like that and $4 will get you a cup of coffee. So anyway, bird in the hand versus two in the bush. What about what the soul desires? What kind of attitude is that is spoken of all through Ecclesiastes as well as all through the New Testament? It's a covetous attitude. It takes away from the beauty of what one does have, what the eye sees. What the eye sees is something I've already got, and I can be happy with that. I can be satisfied with that. I can use that. But what I'm dreaming about, chasing after the wind. 14th, vanity or futility of greedy ambition or desire. Okay, verse 10, whatever exists has already been named, and it is known what man is, for he cannot dispute with him who is stronger than he. We see a couple of three things here that Solomon refers to. Number one, you cannot recreate names. Things have already been named, right? What did Bill say? Y'all know Bill when I referred to him? William Shakespeare. What about a rose? You want to call it something else? You want to rename it? It's already been named a rose, but let's call it whatever you want to think of. Still smells like a rose, doesn't it? No matter what you call it. So, things cannot be recreated. It's already been named. Man has an inborn weakness, we see here in verse 10. For he cannot dispute with him who is stronger than he. He must face the reality, but he is but flesh and blood. Maybe it was a commentary on Genesis that I read that brought this up, and it's common, easy enough to understand. But what can we create? We can invent things. We can compose music. We can compose or paint a painting, but aren't we just using things that God has already created? God is God because he can create. That means something from nothing. And mankind cannot do that. We cannot create. We've got to face the reality, but we are only flesh and blood. Whatever exists has already been named, and it is known what man is. Now, New American Standards does not say for he cannot dispute with him who is stronger than he. I think him should be capitalized because what do you got? Okay, well, I'm the NAS too, but it's not. But the concept is the same no matter whether it is or not. We can't argue with God. We've got to accept things, what we've got and what we've been given. How many times have you heard there's a song? That's just the way it is. Accept what we got. That's just the way it is. Well, like it or not, so that's what we have to accept. I think the point of this being that moaning and whining and complaining cannot change our limitations. Those are not going to help anything under the sun. Okay? Be happy. Be happy with what you've got. The 15th vanity is, I don't know whether I'll go here yet or not. There's something else that I wanted to bring up about, when he talks about eating and drinking and living your life and stuff, Solomon's not talking about party time, okay? He's not saying eat, drink, and be merry, that attitude. So I don't want you to confuse that. What he's basically saying is, what do we do every day? Well, we eat and we drink, and what should we be? We should be happy with that. Many times you hear prayed from this pulpit right up here or out here. Thank you for what we've got, the house, the roof over our head, the clothes that we wear, food to eat. A whole lot of people don't have that. And we should be happy with those things. Be content. The only thing about keeping wanting and wanting and wanting and more was what we referred to earlier. That's the realm of Sheol. That's the appetite that is never satisfied. You will never get enough if all you're doing is striving for anything other than happiness and a life with God. That's the investment right there. You want to be rich? Boom. Right there. Verse 11, for there are many words which increase futility, and what then is the advantage to a man? 15th vanity, the use of many words. We talked about earlier that last week when we were talking about praying and standing up before people and just going on, and the more you talk and the more times you say vain repetitions and stuff, that's supposed to make it a big deal. Words going to change the world. The wisest, brilliant man with the most fluent delivery of words that exists on the globe can tell us that the sun is not going to come up tomorrow. What's it going to do? It's coming up unless God decides that it's not. So all of these words are futile. Man, sometimes I get hooked in on YouTube or something watching these, when they go into that pawn shop and they want their television back that they don't have a ticket for, or they get pulled over and the police is telling them to get out of the car and they won't do what, and they end up having to call and arrest and, I try not to, I can't watch them long because it just absolutely drives me crazy. But what about the futility of those words? When they start arguing with the law enforcement, or they start arguing with the guy that they pawned this thing to that didn't even belong, they will talk and go on and on and on. And if I do watch it to the end, they're being carried out in handcuffs. So what is that? That's what he's talking about, the futility. Many words, all it does is increase the futility of life for mankind. And with these limitations that we read back up in verse 10, he can't recreate things. We're born weak. We got to face the reality. If we look at those things, the ability that man has to speak is more than other creatures. That's what they said. I don't know if the whales and porpoise and elephants and I don't know. They all got communications. I know what Hank or Gus, either one, our dogs, when they come in there, they tell me straight up it's time for dinner or it's time to go outside. So, they're not speaking, but they are communicating. We're talking about speech, not communications. So, what is the advantage? Not really. Hank and Gus communicate with me without any words. Is that what we're talking about here? The words aren't doing it. That doesn't matter. Hank will get me up at 5 in the morning if it's time, and it's like he hasn't said anything, but I know what he's saying. And boy, am I glad he can't talk, because he'd be saying, "Hey, man, get up." The futility. Okay, so again, we have a bit of a rhetorical question. For who knows what is good for man during his lifetime, during the few years of his futile life? He will spend them like a shadow, because who can tell a man what will be after him under the sun? Once again, we got this rhetorical question about who knows. Solomon's not really expecting us to answer, and he's only got one answer for all of this, all of these times. 5 times in the book of Ecclesiastes, he asks, "Who knows? Who knows the answer to this? Who knows that? Who knows this?" This formula of him asking these questions is kind of emphasized by man's inability to answer many of life's important questions by himself. What answers have we got in the big picture? Maybe. Got to guess. Someone else's answer may be just as viable as ours. So now what are we going to do? Use a lot of words arguing in futility about who's, and what are we going to gain by that? Not anything that I can come up with. Later, Solomon observes that God enables man to know some of life's mysteries. We'll talk about that as we continue. The question here being asked, involves what is good to a man to do during his short life. Since it is brief, there's no time to waste. How should our valuable moments be used? If the answer is not given and we don't come up with a understanding of what life is worth to us, the afterlife, then it's all futile. According to verse 12, the few years of his life he will spend them like a shadow. For who can tell a man what will be after him under the sun? Man will spend all his time, wasting his time with meaningless activities and spend his days like a shadow. What's a shadow worth? What is it? It's nothing. It's worthless. It's a shadow. It's not even a reflection. A mirror, at least, as you look in a mirror, you at least get something back, right? But a shadow, go touch it, go grab it, pull it down, put it over here, fold it up. No, it's a waste, having no substance or no value. Man is basically on stage in a one-act play. He has two obvious limitations which expand on those that we mentioned up in verse 10. He cannot identify with certainty the good each person should be doing. Who knows what is good for a man during his lifetime, during the few years of his life? What's good? He can't identify. It's certainly not things that he can see with the eye. It's not even things that he dreams about. Are you certain about those things? What can man look at with certainty? We can't identify the good each person should be doing. Nor, for who can tell a man what will be after him under the sun? No matter where you are. Who knows what happens next? Without God and faith about what happens next, we don't know what happens next. I can't tell you what's going to happen next. I can't tell you what's going to happen after you. When Solomon talked about all the wealth and everything, he says even the wealthy person doesn't know what's going to happen to all his stuff. He's going to spend all his life working and being miserable, just like this guy that we had, eating alone, misery, pain, anguish, to gain all of this wealth, and then going to give it to someone, and what's going to happen with them? They going to take care of it or enjoy it, or are they going to throw it all away, spend it all, lose it in a bad investment? Stock market crash? And I've spent my whole life gaining this stuff. And now what? It's like a shadow. That's how much it's worth. Okay, so the preacher is slamming the door pretty much here on slamming every door except the door of faith. The door of riches and a man's wisdom has been slammed. What's our money going to do for us? Doom. What's our personal wisdom going to do for us? Doom. They will not lead man to answers in his life. He must turn to door number 3. The door of faith. God can teach man the true value of living, and only he knows what happens next. And if he wills, if it is his will, we'll do chapter 7 of Ecclesiastes next week. Thanks for your attention this morning.